We're live here at HCIC in Austin, Texas.
Podcasters are today's influencers, so you included.
I'm no influencer. Being a little bit modest. He's modest, guys. You're not deliberately being a competitor. You're just better at it. Hi there. We're live here at HCIC in beautiful downtown Austin, Texas, and I'm here with my good friend Anna from Sirius Media.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. I'm excited to have a conversation with you today. But before we jump in,
Yes.
why don't you share a little bit with the people, our audience, who you are, and a little bit about what you're doing in.
Yes, thank you. So I am the head of industry for SiriusXM Media's healthcare vertical. And just to backtrack, if you're unfamiliar with SiriusXM Media, we're sort of the newly formed advertising group comprised of Pandora Streaming, SiriusXM Satellite, and our podcast network. And so basically, we work with health systems, health insurers, state departments of health, anything health and wellness related, and help those advertisers activate an audio campaign across all of our different properties.
Audio campaign, you're speaking right up my alley here, being a podcaster and all of that, because I think audio is a really important medium. I've been podcasting for 8 years, so I kind of believe in it.
Yeah.
But it's because I'm a consumer of audio. I consume audio all the time. I have Sirius in my car, but I also, at home, I listen to podcasts and I stream radio stations through my home device and all that. This is a medium that I think is kind of underlooked.
100%, especially in healthcare. So when I'm presenting to a big group of healthcare marketers, I always start out with asking everyone, can you raise your hand if you've streamed music or a podcast in the last week or the last 2 days? And every single person in the room inevitably raises their hand. And then I ask, how many of you work for a healthcare brand that has a dedicated audio marketing strategy? And like 2 people will raise their hand. So it's a good visual representation of what we call the opportunity gap. So Americans are spending 31% of their media time with audio, yet marketers are only allocating around 9% of their marketing budgets towards the audio medium. For healthcare, it's even lower. It's like 1% to 2%.
Wow.
So for an industry like healthcare that has historically relied so heavily on visual mediums, as we know, like television, search, and social, audio represents a really great opportunity to outpace the competition by reaching a relatively untapped audience. There's no sea of sameness.
Right. And do you think it's partly because we think of audio, we kind of relate it to radio, and radio is like and don't get me wrong, I listen to radio, but it is a broadcast medium. And we've been talking a lot as marketers to get more, focused, segmented, targeted, et-cetera. And really, if you go on the underpinning of the current audio landscape, you can do those sorts of things,
100%.
right?
Yeah, audio is a completely, today it's digital audio. A theme at this conference has been obviously personalization and how you can kind of supercharge that with AI. And that's actually something, Pandora, for example, that's been around for 20 years. Like we've been leveraging personalization all along. We have, 20 years of first party listener insights and data to help hyper-target campaigns, HIPAA-compliant targeting, first-party targeting. So it's a very personalized listening experience and advertising experience.
Well, Pandora is also kind of one of the early adopters of AI to understand and predict what kind of music you want. I mean, I remember that from years ago, back before they even called it AI.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think that requires a lot of sophistication in understanding listenership behavior, et cetera. So, knowing now that we have this other medium, how do you work with organizations on helping them understand that value? Because I think that it's compelling, 30% people listen to audio, but I think we're a lot of metrics-driven people.
Yes.
So what things can we pick up from audio? What are some of the metrics we can measure?
That's a great question. I mean, we can of course pixel. We have what we call, how there's click through, we have hear through. So there are, of course, ways to pixel in a HIPAA compliant way. And one of the misconceptions about audio is that it's exclusively an upper funnel awareness building tactic only. But because we're a digital platform, we're actually really great at driving lower funnel conversions, like making appointments. When you combine a kind of a combination of products like audio ads along with display and video ads on our platform, we see just really strong results. And then at the end of the day, consumers are spending 4 hours a day listening to audio content. When you look at digital audio specifically, that jumps up to 5. So in today's fragmented media landscape, that's just a lot of time to be able to engage with the consumer. And another stat I like to share with our clients is like, there's this inherent connection between audio and health. So any third-party research will show, and we conduct our own research to show that listeners are using, music and podcasts to benefit their physical, mental, and emotional well-being. And the same thing can't be said about other mediums being good for your health.
Well, I know I listen to digital audio when I'm working out,
Exactly.
right? Or on the treadmill or whatever it might be. In fact, that's almost exclusively what I listen to. I don't put an iPad and watch things.
Right.
I want to hear things because I'm
Yeah.
busy looking at, and I think it makes a lot of sense, right? It gets into you. But
Yeah.
in order to use this medium effectively, you have to be a little bit more nuanced and different, though, right? It isn't like the old-fashioned broadcast radio ads,
Exactly.
et cetera. So, like, how do you work with organizations on that, like, to craft the right message?
Yeah, that's a great question because it's not one to many, it's one to one. You're literally in someone's ears or in their home on their Alexa smart speaker. So we have an in-house creative agency that is complementary to our advertisers that really helps curate the audio, the right message for your brand in the streaming audio environment. Obviously, the message you serve in a podcast is different than the message you would serve in a music environment. So we kind of help with all of those nuances.
Right. And, how do you get to that personalized level, though? I mean, it isn't like you're listening to something that's like, hey, Chris, I know you're enjoying this podcast, but have you thought about...
Yes.
It's not like that, right?
Right.
What are some of those factors? Do you create personas? Like, how do you segment your audiences?
Right. So we have so much insight into our listeners because they've been listening for 20 years and just all the data we're collecting on a daily basis. So we can really help curate a message based on, obviously we recommend doing it by generation. Like the message you serve a Gen Z listener is very different than the one you would serve Gen X. And because we have insights for every single demographic, we're able to help listeners do that in their local market.
Right. It reminds me a lot of, like, I've done a lot of email marketing campaigns, and it's a similar thing where you have to understand your segment and different messages, et cetera. And I can imagine, and there's a thing I recently learned about, well, actually over the last couple of years, dynamic audio insertions too, which is really, well, share a little bit about that because maybe many people don't know about that.
Yeah, so we can dynamically serve distinctive creatives to someone based on the weather in their local market or their zip code, their age demo, all these kinds of factors. So just to get hyper personalized. So it certainly isn't. We don't even call it. It's not radio. It really is like digital audio. And podcasting has really catapulted, audio into the mainstream, especially lately. There's been talk of, not to get into politics, but that it was sort of like the podcast election.
Yeah.
Podcast played a huge role in influencing people, and it's it's a great vehicle to communicate.
And it's many people that don't typically are tuning out of the other types of media channels,
Right.
and maybe are becoming advertising blind online because the ads pressing things.
Right.
This is still one that can maybe effectively get through to them, right? If you think about it. I mean, it's comforting for me as a podcaster to know that, right?
Yeah.
But I can imagine it affords a lot of great opportunity for people in our space to really kind of reconsider the utilization of these channels.
Yeah, podcasters are today's influencers. So you included. You have a lot of
I'm no influencer.
influence over your listeners. Yeah. And that love and affinity that people feel towards their favorite hosts or their favorite shows really carries over to the brand that support the medium. So
Yeah.
it's a gold mine opportunity for healthcare.
That's really interesting. I'm glad you kind of shared that with me. I mean, being in the space, and I run ads on my network, on my podcast network, but I never really kind of understood or thought about the audience and how we can do that. And that's really interesting. Anna, thank you so much for spending a few minutes with me to share a little bit and help educate on this space.
Thank you. I really appreciate it, Chris. Thank you.